Hello, this video is about your guide to the basics of workers' compensation. Today we're focusing on medical care. Hello, my name is Ty Wilson. I'm a Georgia workers' compensation attorney practicing law in the state of Georgia. And so let's get into medical care. In order to obtain medical care for a work injury claim, you must be an employee, meaning you're not an independent contractor. Now, there are several questions as to what determines if someone is an employee and or an independent contractor, and that's something that we'd recommend you reach out and contact a Georgia workers' compensation attorney. However, typically speaking, an employee is someone who has taxes taken out of their checks, and they are able to be controlled as far as their schedule, or as they say, their time, method, manner, and means. And so what does that mean? Well, it means an employer can say, hey, I need you here at 8 o'clock, and I need you to show up at 8 o'clock, and you'll be leaving at 5. We'll get an hour lunch, you'll get a couple of breaks, etc. And when you get here, I'll tell you what to do. And then they start laying out a schedule for you. And that is typically what an employee is, versus an independent contractor is typically someone where they say, I need you to do a job for me. We'll pay you for the job. We're not going to pay you hourly. You bring your own tools and show up whenever you can. We'll have that job for you, and it'll be ready sometime around next Wednesday, something along those lines. So it's a little bit different, but this video is not meant to determine the difference between an employee and independent contractor. We can do a later video on that. The important thing is, if you are injured on the job and you are an employee, that is where you would qualify for workers' compensation medical benefits. Now, there are some other things that you need to be aware of. As I said, first of all, you should be an employee. Second of all, you need to be physically injured, meaning a mental injury only will not apply in Georgia workers' compensation. Also, you must be injured. Your injury must occur arising out of and in the course and scope of your employment. Now, those are two separate things. So arising out of is a connection between your work as an employee and the injury that you received. And so there has to be some sort of connection. So that's the arising out of. In the course and scope of, well, that's where the employee is helping the employer's business goals. So you must have both in the course and scope of employment. So arising out of and in the course and scope of employment. We typically say that means you were doing the job that you were hired to be doing to help your employer out. And there must be a connection between, as I said, your work and the injury that you sustained. Now, if you meet those things and meet those two items, and you were not intoxicated by drugs or alcohol, or you were not horseplaying or goofing around, those are all exceptions to workers' compensation and can potentially have your claim denied. It's not a guarantee. So once again, just because you had a drug test performed, you should still reach out to a Georgia workers' compensation attorney. A lot of it is factually based, and it depends on how you were hurt. Were you hurt because of something you did and you were intoxicated? Well, chances are that's going to be denied. However, you want to double check. You're going to be in a bad situation if you find yourself testing positive for drugs. This is not some sort of lecture on what you should or should not do. This is a usually after the fact situation. Reach out to a Georgia workers' compensation attorney, find out what your rights are and what may or may not happen as a result of it. Get the specifics in front of someone who knows what's going on in the Georgia workers' compensation system. Horseplay, that's another thing where they can exclude and or deny the claim if you were playing a practical joke, something went wrong, somebody got seriously hurt, or you got hurt in the process of all that. The employer does have the ability to deny that claim. Once again, that is also very fact specific. And so it's very important that if that's the reason your claim was denied, that you reach out and double check, and I would say with multiple Georgia workers' compensation attorneys. Now, what's important is once you have a workers' compensation claim set up, and how do you do that? Well, after you get hurt, the first thing you should do is provide notice to your employer, your supervisor and or boss. Let them know, 1, you're hurt, 2, you need medical care. How do you get medical care? Well, there should be, in a perfect world, what is called a posted panel of physicians. That's usually in an employee break room. It's usually near the minimum wage and Family Medical Leave Act explanation posters and so forth. However, sometimes these are in the drawer of a human resource office and so forth. So you need to tell them that you've been hurt on the job. And when I say them, I mean your supervisor and your boss. And you need to request medical care. If they have a valid posted panel of physicians, they may get to control your medical care. That's one of those critical moments that you really do need to speak with the Georgia Workers' Compensation attorney. Find out the doctors. All these doctors have different reputations for how friendly they are or how not friendly they are, depending upon their past behaviors. And that's something that only a Georgia Workers' Compensation attorney or someone with great deal experience in the Georgia Workers' Compensation world can speak to you about. Once you've given notice and you've received your initial medical care, after every visit, you're going to want to get what is called a work status report. What does the work status report say? Well, the work status report will say one of three things. It will either say that you are full duty and can return back to work, in which case you would go and hand that back to hand the work status or a copy of it to your employer, and you get back to work. The second work status is that you're out of work completely. And that's pretty straightforward. The doctor's saying you cannot return back to your work, and they will likely say until either your next visit or until you have an MRI or some sort of diagnostic test. But that document is going to be the document that says you're not able to work. You also need to take that and make a copy of it, send the employer a copy of it, letting them know you're out of work, and then handing it to your attorney, or handing it to your attorney first if you have one, and then your attorney should then reach out to the adjuster and request that they start income benefits. The first 7 days they don't have to pay you the income benefits, but after that they do. And we'll talk more about income benefits in another video regarding the basics of Georgia Workers' Compensation. The third work status, and this is the one that we see most people with actually, is light duty. And so what is light duty? Well, light duty is whatever the doctor says it is. And so typically, if you have a back injury, they're going to say limit or no stooping, bending, twisting, turning, these kind of things. And they're basically making restrictions so that you don't re-injure or aggravate the injury that you have. And so they may have lifting restrictions, no lifting more than 5 pounds, no lifting more than 10 pounds. Sometimes they have sedentary duty. Sedentary duty is sitting work only. Well, just because you work standing up all day and all of a sudden you've been released to sitting work only, you cannot presume that your employer does not have a job for you. So you still have to give them a copy of the work status report. You should get one of these work status reports after every single visit, with the exception of maybe an MRI. That's not going to likely change your work status. It's with your main doctor that you're going to. If you're initially going to a clinic, you need to get a work status report every time, and you need to not leave the doctor's office without one. That could be a ticket to receiving income benefit checks. It could be a ticket to returning back to work or not returning back to work, depending upon the nature of your injury. So it's very, very important. Every single visit, a work status report. That will get you on your way to your medical care. Now, what typically happens is going to be up to the doctors. If you're at a clinic, a lot of times they request physical therapy depending upon the injury. If it doesn't get better, sometimes they will request a MRI. Sometimes they will refer you on to an orthopedic specialist or a neurologist or a neurosurgeon or so forth. And so that's kind of the general areas and the basics of getting the medical care and continuing on either back to work depending upon what the doctor says you can or cannot do. And if you have specific questions about where you're at in the process of your medical care, then you should reach out to a Georgia Workers' Compensation attorney and speak with them about what specific questions you have based upon your specific facts. We hope this information's been helpful, and we hope you come check out our other videos on the basics of Georgia Workers' Compensation. Thank you.